It is a blessing to be back here again. This is the fourth time, only the second time for the camp. The first time I ever came to this ministry was actually with Dr. Jim Evangelist in the War Special Forces, and I think it was 2016, fall of 2016, is I think it was when we were here, if that sounds right, when the Special Forces was here. So it's a blessing to be back. A couple different times. Came with Morris Gleiser one time, actually, to do children's meetings for him, and then the second time at camp. Obviously, this is the first time, though, that I've brought my wife with me. Jessica, if you want to stand up. It's a blessing to have her along. And actually, it is so much better as a preacher to bring your wife with you, let me tell you that. It was a blessing to get different opportunities as a single guy, but it's a lot better to have your wife along with you. If you have your Bibles, turn to the book of Luke. The book of Luke and chapter number 6. Back in, I guess Civil War time or even earlier, but when I think of it, I think of the Civil War time. There was a certain particular thing we're going to talk about today that I wonder if you have. You see, back in those days, there was a lot of different factors in warfare than we have today. Obviously, weapons were totally different. Communication was totally different. Means of transportation was totally different. And there was one particular thing that we don't often associate with our wars nowadays that was very important, especially for soldiers during the Civil War. And that was the presence of their flag. And there's a couple different reasons for that. Obviously, when we think of a flag, a lot of us associate it with the pride or the morale booster that we need. When we look at an American flag, most of us are proud to see that flying. And for these soldiers, a flag did more than just that for them. So you see, back then, because of the limited communication that they had, a flag meant a lot of things. First of all, it showed them where to go. When battle became intense, when the noise got loud with the different weapons that they had, the guns, the cannons, whatever they were using, they couldn't really hear very well. In fact, a lot of soldiers in the Civil War ended up going almost completely deaf, just because of how loud things were, and they didn't have different means of ear protection, especially those that were operating certain weapons. They almost all went deaf. So they were trained that where your flag for your group went, and there was different flags for their different units, but where your flag went, that's where you were supposed to go. You couldn't always hear the commander shouting, and even you couldn't hear those drums beating at times. So wherever that flag went, that was where you were supposed to go, and you were supposed to stick together. It was obviously a big morale booster. If your flag was flying, you knew that you still had a fighting chance. So much so that soldiers would die simply to make sure the flag still flew. Even if it meant they could possibly risk their life or die for it, even if it meant putting down their weapon to save the flag, so many times soldiers would go for that flag just so that their flag would not fall. Because they knew the other soldiers around them in their group needed that flag. I wonder, are you a flag to follow? Luke chapter number 6 goes through a story of Jesus, and he had some, you could call them enemies, even though I know Jesus loved all people. There were some people out there that were against what Jesus was trying to do. And today I'd like to see the way Jesus responded to them, and I wonder, what kind of flag are you following? Are you someone that your fellow soldiers around you should follow? Someone that those around you would look to in a time of crisis, in a time when things aren't going rough, or when things are going rough. Would they look to you as their flag to follow? Luke chapter number 6, verse 1 says, "And it came to pass on the second Sabbath after the first, that he went through the corn, and his disciples plucked the ears of corn and did eat, rubbing them in their hands." Now, I don't know how y'all are familiar with corn down here. I know I'm from the Midwest, Wisconsin. We got a lot of corn. The idea here is they were shucking the corn so they could eat it. If you've ever picked ears of corn, you don't just eat through the husks that are on there. You have to shuck it. And so they were shucking the corn, and they were going to eat the corn. And certain of the Pharisees said unto them, Why do ye that which is not lawful to do on Sabbath days? You see, can't you just picture this? I love when I'm reading different stories in the Bible or seeing different things in the Bible. I like to try and picture myself as being there and what's going on and picture what my response would be. Now imagine you're here with Jesus and his disciples as a tag along. Maybe you're following. And off in the distance are these Pharisees. Not too far away so they can't hear, but far enough away so people know they're not associated with them. They're not identifying with Jesus' his disciples. It's not like they're following them. They're just seeing what's going on here. So imagine you're following along. You see the Pharisees off to the side within hearing distance. Jesus and the disciples, this is going on. Immediately, those Pharisees that were off in the distance show up right there. They just seem to be there whenever there's something questionable going on. Here's the Pharisees, and they say, What are you doing? Why do ye that which is not lawful to do on Sabbath days? Obviously, what they're trying to do is they're trying to get Jesus to slip or fall in some way. They're trying to get those following Jesus to get discouraged or to realize, hey, something's amiss here with this Jesus guy. Maybe we shouldn't be following him. Their whole purpose is not for good. Did you know that there are Pharisees in our lives? Now, they might not call themselves that. They might not call themselves Pharisees, but there's people that stand off in the distance looking for ways you might slip and fall. Looking for ways where they can tear you down or get you discouraged, especially if you're following Jesus. If you're doing what God wants you to do, for some reason, these Pharisees sometimes seem all the more present. But it doesn't have to be a discouraging thing, and Jesus wasn't fazed by it. And Jesus, verse 3, answering them said, Have you not read so much as this, what David did, when himself was an hungered, and they which were with him, how he went into the house of God, and did take and eat the showbread, gave also to them that were with him, which it is not lawful to eat, but for the priests alone? And obviously we're not going to get to the whole story here, the reasoning behind that, but Jesus is basically justifying what him and the disciples were doing. There are three things today, and we'll look at a few more verses in just a second, but there's three things today I want us to look at. The resistance of the Pharisees. Do you know anyone like that? Anyone that you might call them a Pharisee? You probably do. You probably know someone that's out there. Maybe they make fun of you for being part of First Baptist Church of Westwood Lake, or maybe they make fun of you for serving God in a certain way, or decisions you make based on what God's teaching you. They kind of laugh or scoff at that. They make fun of you for that. Maybe it's even family members that are off to the side just trying to get you discouraged in some sort of way. I got to travel, as I mentioned a little bit ago, with Dr. Jim. I traveled from August all the way through May for a year. And there were many a times when you could have pointed out different instances and said, those people are being used of the devil to try and discourage us, to try and get things not to work out. I remember very distinctly, I was in California, and I had dropped one of the teammates off, and we do what's called recruiting. For those of you familiar with it, Monday and Tuesday, we try and go out and recruit as many teenagers from the area, invite them out to these competitions that we hold Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Most of you are very familiar with it. Well, we were out, I can't remember if it was Monday or Tuesday, we're trying to invite teenagers, and I've dropped a buddy of mine off to go out recruit, and I was going to swing around the side, and I went and recruited some teenagers. We get their names and numbers. If they're interested, call them back or text them back later. Well, after about 15 minutes, I was like, oh man, I better go check on that guy. I got to find him, and I don't want him getting in any sort of trouble or get lost or anything. And I had dropped him off by a high school. And sometimes there's certain people that can be a little touchy about where you're at, and you just got to be careful not to disobey any rules that the school has or things like that. You want to do everything appropriately, but there's still people that get frustrated with you even if you're doing everything right. Well, I had dropped him off. I don't remember if it's 10, 15, 20 minutes later. I went back to pick him up. He was nowhere in sight. I did a whole lap around the school. It was kind of like a city block. Did a whole lap around it, couldn't find him. I said, well, I'll do another lap. He's got to be there. Did a second lap, and as I was about halfway through this second lap, I noticed there was like a vehicle I don't remember what kind of car it was, but it was some type of car following behind me. I was like, oh, great. Now I'm going to get in trouble because they're going to think this suspicious van. It was a classic church van. I don't know if y'all have church vans here, but like the 12, 15 passenger vans a lot of churches have for transporting young people. That's what I was driving around. I'm sure it looked super sketch. I'm sure it looked like we were doing something shady, and I was trying not to do anything that was out of the ordinary. But after the second lap, I was starting to get worried. I was like, okay, where is this guy? I just need to pick him up. We need to leave the area so that, police don't get called. Couldn't find him. So I decided to do a third lap, and out of the third lap, still didn't see him. I decided I had to leave. I went back to the school. That car followed me, pulled up right next to me, and it was an elderly lady that had a bunch of her grandkids in the car. Must have been about 4 kids in there, and she starts questioning me. Rolls down her window, calls me over there, and starts chewing me out. What do you think you're doing? I know what you're doing. You're up to no good. I already called the police. They're on their way. And my first reaction was, all right, lady, that's not what I'm doing. Can you just listen for a second? When she finished, I just gave her a brochure and said, listen, ma'am, this is what's going on here. We're just inviting teenagers to a competition. No charge, free food. We give them a Bible message at the end. Tells them how they can know for sure they're on their way to heaven. And I'll never forget, the whole complexion of her face changed. She took it, flipped it over a few times, and she goes, can my grandchildren come to this? I was like, absolutely. I recruited their name, number. 3 of them ended up coming out. It was awesome, but it was one of those instances where I knew the devil was trying to get me discouraged. I could tell a lot of stories of the time when I was well away from the school property. All of a sudden, before I know it, there was 1, 2, 3. There ended up being 5 police cars that showed up. I mean, I felt like putting my hands up the air saying, I'm not carrying any guns, nothing. I'm totally not armed. They came, got my driver's license, found out what I was doing, and they told me where teenagers hang out that afternoon. But it didn't always work out that way. There were times when we'd get kicked off, not told to come back to the area, and it was the devil trying to test us, trying to get scared, using different Pharisees and seeing how you respond. There's going to be resistance if we're serving Jesus. But it doesn't have to work out for bad. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. I'm sure the West Coast girls could tell stories of resistance they've had outdoor knocking, especially in today's culture. You go to certain areas, they're wide open, super friendly people. Other areas you go, and it feels like every door they either ignore you or they want to chew you out and then let you go. But we see the response of Jesus, and this is probably one of the hardest things. Verse number 5, and he said unto them that the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath. Verse 6, and it came to pass also on another Sabbath. So this is a little later on. We don't know if it's the next one. Might be down the road a few weeks. Whatever it is, and it came to pass on another Sabbath that he entered into the synagogue and taught. And there was a man whose right hand was withered. He didn't have use of his right hand. And the scribes and Pharisees are present again. And the scribes and Pharisees watched him, whether he would heal on the Sabbath day, that they might find accusation against him. They're still there, still following, off in the distance, watching to see what would happen. But what I find is super awesome about this story is verse number 8. But he, referring to Jesus, knew their thoughts. And so what did he do? Well, disciples, come here. We got to have a little meeting. You know, these Pharisees are watching, and I'm afraid that if I heal this man's hand, they're going to stir up the people. They're going to get frustrated with us. Our ministries here are going to be ended. We're going to be kicked out. So you know what we're going to do? We're just going to pretend like we didn't really see the withered man. We're going to move on, keep teaching in the synagogue, and nothing will happen. See, I'm afraid sometimes that's our response. We can get someone that confronts us or someone that tries to discourage us in some way, or we get discouraged in some way, and our choice, oh, you know what? Let's just give in and move on. You know, sometimes it's too tough to stand up for Jesus. Let's just move on from here, and I'm sure we'll get an opportunity down the road for something else. What if Jesus would have responded that way? Well, obviously, you could say that the man's hand wouldn't be healed, obviously. But think of the impact it would have had on the people around him. You see, Jesus is kind of like that flag bearer. And we know we can follow his flag because it will never fail. And that flag will always be flying. But I wonder, what if Jesus decides to split up his forces and assigns you as a flag bearer to work alongside him, to lead other people? What kind of flag bearer would you be? But he knew their thoughts and said to the man which had the withered hand, rise up and stand forth in the midst. Not off to the side, some quiet thing like, hey man, come here. I'm going to heal your hand real quick so nobody sees. No, he says, rise up, stand in the midst. And he arose and stood forth, and Jesus said unto them, I will ask you one thing. Is it lawful on the Sabbath days to do good or to do evil? To save a life or destroy it? And looking round about upon them all, he said to the man, stretch forth thy hand. And he did so, and his hand was restored whole as the other. And they were filled with madness and communed one with another what they might do to Jesus. Isn't that awesome? Jesus looked right at this difficulty and commanded the man to stretch forth his hand, is healed. And here's these Pharisees, they get all riled up. They get angry because this guy's not doing what, he's not folding like all these other people have. I'm sure the Pharisees manipulated many a person. They're the kind of people that know how to get their way. When they're not getting their way, they're not happy with it. And here they're not getting their way. They're getting frustrated about it. Do you think the reason for this was an accident? Do you think the reason that Jesus was able to hold that flag so high was an accident? Do you think the reason the disciples didn't get discouraged here was an accident? I couldn't help but read the next verse, verse 12, which says, and it came to pass in those days that he went out into a mountain to pray and continued all night in prayer to God. I don't think it's an accident. This verse comes next in the Bible. You see, one of the keys to being the flag bearer that God would want each and every one of us to be is having that prayer life, that walk with God. That's the communication part. A flag bearer has to know his job. Because think about it. If all the soldiers that are in your group, however many it might be, are following you, you better know what's going on. You better be confident about where you're supposed to head next. And for those of you that really enjoy the Civil War, you see there was very much strategy in a lot of those battles. The playing field, you could say, or the area in which they operated with, wasn't always that big of an area. And they had to know exactly where to go at exactly what time in order for victory to be accomplished. And that's partly why many of those southern generals were able to win some of the battles they did despite majorly outnumbered. Because there were strategists, and their flag bearers, I have no doubt, knew exactly what to do. Exactly where to go and exactly how to lead. I wonder, what kind of flag bearer are you? Turn to Daniel chapter 6 real quick. This is actually, we're going to end, and it's a familiar story. But if you want to talk about some Pharisees and someone that stood strong, this is a story. Daniel chapter 6 and verse 7 says, all the presidents of the kingdom, the governors and the princes, the counselors, the captains, these are some important people, just so you know, have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree that whosoever shall ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days, save of thee, O king, he shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the decree, sign the writing, that it be not changed according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not. Wherefore King Darius signed the writing and the decree. You think these are some big-time Pharisees? They knew exactly what they were doing. And those sound like a lot of important people that had a lot of influence. And sometimes those Pharisees can be pretty intimidating. Could seem like a pretty daunting task to try and stand up to them. But see, that's exactly who God might place in your life. Verse 10, now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he got discouraged. Decided he better obey whatever the king commanded. Decided he won't pray anymore but to the king. Do you think that's how the story goes? Obviously not. It's almost humorous to think of it that way because we know what he did. He went into his house, as his windows opened in his chamber toward Jerusalem. He kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he did aforetime. I don't know about you, but if he was the flag bearer, I'd want to be in his group. I'd want to be a soldier following him. Because I could know following him, he's not going to let me down. He's not going to give up when times might seem tough. He's not going to give up when the enemy's overwhelming, when your soldiers or your mount seems few. He's not going to give up when the Pharisees are there attacking. He's not going to give up when people are trying to discourage him. He's going to stand strong. No matter what happens, he's going to stand for God. So what kind of flag bearer are you? See, I believe Jesus wants every single Christian to be a flag bearer. Jesus wants every single Christian to be an example for others to follow, to be a leader for others to follow. You're holding or you're assigned to a flag. And there could be others around you that are watching you. When that flag goes down, you know what that means? It's over. We got to get out of here. In the Civil War time, when the flag bearer went down and nobody picked up the flag, you knew that your side had lost. You knew that this battle was going to the enemy. And you know, some of us may have already failed. We may have already dropped that flag that God's trying to have us to hold. But it's not too late to pick it back up again. It's not too late to pick that flag back up and say, God, I'm going to serve you. God, I need to be the leader you want me to be. God, I need to be an example to those around me. We were in Bonita Springs, Florida, actually. Some of you may know where that is. I'm not quite exactly sure where that is in Florida. I think it's on the west coast, if I'm not mistaken, near Naples, Florida, I think. We're in Bonita Springs, Florida, and there's a church there that actually really amazed me. Dr. Jim would go there sometimes with the War Special Forces, and things weren't always easy. They started out, they had hardly any teenagers that would come the first year. But the pastor got excited because I think 2 people got saved at the War Special Forces, and that's pretty awesome. Anytime someone gets saved, it's something to get excited about. So he wanted to have them back the very next year. Now, generally this isn't how things work. You don't go back every year. But the very next year was the year I was on tour and we were back. And apparently it was a small enough area where they were in where word was spread we were back again. And last time there was some resistance. In fact, the first time that they were there, it got so bad that and the night after either Wednesday or Thursday night, some teenagers went and broke glass beer bottles all over the church building. They vandalized some of the property and they stole, I think it was the Special Forces sign that we post out front. And the pastor got excited about that because he looked at that and he said, that's the devil trying to fight against us. That means there's victories that are going to be won. He looked at those Pharisees and got excited because that means God's going to work if we believe him, if we do our part. So we were there the next year, and the pastor was excited, couldn't wait to see what God was going to do. And I remember seeing his faith and thinking, God's going to bless this. God's going to reward it. We had such an incredible turnout. The Christian school's small. There must have been, at most, 20 students, junior high through high school. But that first war night, we must have had 65, 70 teenagers out there. The next night, it was more, all the way till the third night, almost 100 teenagers were there. It was funny because someone had suggested, maybe you should hire some police or some security for the night, but the pastor said, no way, God's gonna deliver. We saw multiple teenagers get saved. Nothing ever happened. And I really believe it was because of that pastor's faith. Because he looked at it as an opportunity when the Pharisees were there for God to succeed. So tonight, as you go home throughout this week, throughout your life, will you be the flag bearer that God wants you to be? There's people around you that need you. If you don't do your part, there's others that will get discouraged and fail.